Hey and welcome everyone back to Kyron's World. If you're new here, thank you so much for joining. My name is Kevin and I'm a soon-to-be medical student at Barts in London Medical School. So in this video we will talk all about the UCAT exam and what you need to know in order to prepare best for the UCAT. So maybe first, what is the UCAT exactly? So UCAT stands for University Clinical Aptitude Test, and it is a test which is used by UK, Australian and New Zealand and some other medical schools to assess applicants alongside their grades and their personal statement and work experience to determine if they're invited for interview or if they get an offer later on. So the UCAT is a computer-based test which you have to sit in a certified test center and you have to register for, and in total it lasts 2 hours with 5 different sections which are each allocated a certain amount of time, and you have 1 minute of reading time between each of the sections. So, as most parts of our life, COVID-19 has also impacted the UCAT testing this year, and the current situation is the following. I refer here to the update that I read, which was from the 27th of May. So the current situation is that they said that registration is not open yet and dates have yet to be determined, but they advise candidates to start familiarizing themselves with the content and with the format after UCAT, as well as they will publish a new update on the 1st of June 2020. So that's why I thought this is the perfect time to make this video, because as they said, you should start familiarizing yourself with the content and the format, and you soon will ask yourself, how should I prepare for the test in order to score a decent score? So to give you guys a bit of context and background, my test score was 2,610, which is not the highest if you consider that the maximum test score is 3,600, but I would say it's a decent score. It got me 3 offers in total for medical school, and I think it's all about sort of applying strategically. So this guide or sort of this video is not aimed to tell you how you can score in the 90th percentile, because obviously I didn't score in the 90th percentile, but I think this video is more of sort of a general advice video, how to get sort of a decent score, and I think how much in the end you achieve is very much depending on how much effort you put into, how much time you have, and just sometimes also on luck how the test questions are this year and how you find it. So yeah, don't take this as a guide which will tell you exactly how to score the maximum amount of points, but it's more like a video to tell you a bit of the sort of general tips which got me a decent score. So also keep in mind that there is a fee which you have to pay when you register for the test, and there are bursary available if you come from a low income background, so also make sure to check that out on the website. But in general the fee is around £115 if you sit it outside of the UK or the EU, and between £50 to £80 if you sit it within the EU. Also be aware that you might have to pay more money if you book your test after a certain date, because they simply charge you sort of an extra fee for that or a high. So as I said, you get 2 hours to complete the test and you have to complete 5 different sections, and each section is then allocated a certain amount of time, and if the time passes you automatically move on to the next section and you cannot go back. So keep that in mind. So the 5 sections are verbal reasoning, which tests sort of for your ability to extract knowledge from text and how fast you can read and how you can sort of memorize what you've just read, and then you have to answer questions based on the text that you just read. So for verbal reasoning you get a total of 21 minutes. The next section is called decision making, and in decision making it's more sort of like a logic test, so you get certain scenarios, or maybe you have to evaluate Euler diagrams or Venn diagrams, sort of questions which are, for example, you have 5 chairs and somebody sitting in the middle, and then 2 chairs away from the person, another person sitting, but that person cannot sit next to that person, and sort of who is sitting on that particular chair. And for decision making you get a total of 31 minutes. The next section is called quantitative reasoning, and it checks sort of for your mathematical skills, and you get a total of 24 minutes for that section. And what you basically have to know is sort of like doing some quick percentage calculations and sort of evaluating graphs and all of that. The next section is called abstract reasoning, and I cannot tell you guys how much I dislike this section, but it is part of the UCAT. Some people really like it. I certainly do not like it, but you know, I also somehow made it through it, and you get a total of 30 minutes, and basically what you have to do is sort of like pattern detection. So for each section you can score a score between 300 and 900 points, which then adds up to a total maximum score between 1,200 and 3,600. So, and then there's the fifth section, which is the situational judgment test. And this section is sort of different from all the other sections because A, it tests for totally different abilities, and B, it's also differently scored. So the situational judgment test is more sort of designed to check your ability to take moral decisions, or so what you get are different scenarios where certain people do something, or you presented with a scenario where you find yourself in when you, for example, work in a hospital, and then you get 4 different options what you could do in that situation, and then you have to choose one. And what basically is different here, that yes, there is a right and wrong, but there's also something sort of in between. So you can also score marks if you do not choose the best answer, but which is very close. So you in general have 2 answers which are sort of considered right. One that is the best answer, which a panel of experts also would choose, and then there's one which is very close to that answer, and then there's normally 2 answers which sort of do reflect that you do not have yet the skills or the abilities to judge correctly in that particular situation. Score for the situational judgment test, but you're categorized in 1 of 4 bands, with 1 being the best and 4 being sort of the lowest. And I scored a band 2 in my situational judgment test, which I think is pretty good. So yeah. So now that you know what the UCAT is about and how it's generally structured, of course it was just a very broad overview, let's get into the question how you should prepare, when you should start preparing, and how much time you should allocate to preparation for the UCAT. So I did some research, and the official UCAT website says they would advise you to do between 4 to 6 weeks of preparation. Of course, keep in mind that that's very individual. Some people need more time, some people need less time, and I spent between 2 to 3 months. I think it was somewhere around 2.5 months, which seems pretty much, but actually I think for me it's easier to revise and prepare in small bits rather than like big blocks, but sort of in a shorter time period. So I chose a longer time period, but like with regular shorter blocks of preparation. I divided my preparation in 3 different phases. So the first phase was sort of around 1 month long, and it was just familiarizing myself with the content, with the question types, reading different tips, watching videos about the different section, and just getting an idea what they would like, what is it that they're looking for, what is that they're testing me on in those different sections. And I did some practice questions while I did this. I would spend usually around 1 hour a day, which I would always put somewhere in the middle of my day because I had my lunch break then, and sort of I had this 1 hour time slot that I always had, and sort of to build up this routine. So after this first month, I took my first full practice test, and I went into this practice test with the expectation that this is not gonna be my best. It's just to see where I am right now. And another very important thing about doing the practice test is that you can determine your weak sort of areas or the question types that you're not really comfortable with yet. So then I move into the second phase of my preparation, which is still doing practice questions every day for 1 hour, but now focusing on the areas that I identified before as being sort of my weak areas. And this, I think, is very important because there's no sense to just preparing and practicing sections which you're already really comfortable with and good with, because in the end you need to score well in sort of all sections. Of course you can balance it out a bit, but in the end I think the best strategy is to try to get the hang about every section. So then the last phase, the third phase, and this was about 2 to 3 weeks before my actual test date, was sort of my intensive preparation time. Now I would level it up a bit and not do just 1 hour of revision every day, but maybe around 1.5, 2, sometimes 3, depends how much time I had. And I would do a lot more practice tests to really practice timing and sort of preparing myself for the real deal. For the test, I would practice with the computer. I would use the calculator that they provide you with in the test, which is also an on-screen calculator, and I would just simulate real test experiences, and that I know what to expect when I go into the test center and sit the test. So now let's dive into my top 10 tips for the preparation process. So my first one is just that preparation is key, and that sounds very obvious, but believe me, I've met people who said like, I don't need practice questions. I did maybe 5 or 10 of them, and that's totally, now I know how the test looks like. And I would definitely advise you to not do so. I would advise you to really practice a lot, because the more you practice, the more you get the hang of the pattern, you get faster and all of that, and that all helps you to score better in the UCAT. So my second tip is that you should keep track of sort of your preparation process. So what I did was that I created an Excel table, and I would put in the date and then in a different section how many questions I did from each type and how many I did right, how many I did wrong, and sort of calculate how am I doing. And I would do this for every time I sat down and prepare. It's just a matter of maybe 5 to 10 minutes after each preparation session, but it would help me immensely to sort of see where is still room for development and which areas are already quite good. So my third point, and I already briefly mentioned that, but I just want to emphasize it, is that you should focus on your weak areas. Of course, in the beginning you try to sort of get an idea about all the sections, but there's gonna be a point in time when you realize where you do good and where you still have sort of some problems with. So it doesn't make sense to comfort yourself with doing just the questions that you know that you're good with, sort of to boost your confidence. Yes, you should go into the exam and be confident in yourself, but at the same time you should not neglect or sort of block out the reality that you just still have some sort of problems with different sections and just that you need to improve on it. So my fourth tip is use a variety of resources, and I actually will talk about the resources that I've used and that I would recommend to you. And there are different resources, so you can get a book, you can use question banks online, there's a mobile app for your phone which I would really recommend you to get. And there are just different resources, but also keep in mind there are also a lot of services which would like to charge you a lot of money. And actually the only thing that I paid for was a book that I've ordered, which was around 18 euros, so I believe around 22 pounds. And besides that, I did not pay for any service. If you would like to do that, that's okay. And I don't blame those services for charging you money. Of course, they put in a lot of effort, and it's, if you think about it, an investment into your future. But just be aware that you do not need to buy every single thing that is out there to help you preparing for the UCAT. You do not have to book very expensive UCAT crash courses. Obviously they have some sort of value, but the question is if you really need that and if it's worth the money. So think about that and just don't go out there and buy every single thing you can find because you think it will maximize your chances to score high on the UCAT. So my fifth point is that you should build a routine. And what I mean by that is that you should find yourself a spot, a time, every day where you would like to revise, because I think it's really important to not fall into the trap of like, okay, today I will not revise, but tomorrow I can just make up for it and revise a bit. And I think that's very dangerous. So what I would recommend you is to really build a routine, a preparation routine for the UCAT exam. It helped me a lot because I knew every day at that and that time I will do it. So there was no room for like, okay, I will do it later, or I will do it maybe on the weekend or something like that. So just build a routine. I think it really helps. So my next point is timing, and I think timing is something that is so important but yet underestimated every year. And in fact, I myself did this mistake of thinking, okay, timing is not so important as like getting the content. And I think that's not true, because timing can make or break your score, to be honest. So the UCAT is designed to put you a bit under stress, under time constraints, and see how you deal with that situation. So it's impossible sometimes to answer all the questions, and sometimes it just doesn't help. You should not spend too much time with a question where you cannot come up with the answer, and just like rather move on. So it's important to practice this and know when it's time to sort of just move on and when it's worth spending a bit more time and coming to the answer. So definitely make sure to practice timing, and I will do a dedicated video about timing in the UCAT. So my next point is that you should fresh up your math skills, like percentage calculations, evaluating graphs, because that is very helpful for the quantitative reasoning. And yes, we all learned that somewhere in middle school, and we know how to do percentage calculations, but if you know sort of those shortcuts, then that's really helpful to save you some time. And as I said before, timing is really important. So if you find ways to do things faster but still correct, then that's really good. And I think a good way to do so is to memorize those formulas, which will give you sort of like a shortcut when it comes to those calculations like percentage or stuff. Number 8 is that the situational judgment test is a lot of time just sort of considered as a section where you can just use your common sense. And so while you should use your common sense, it is also good to So while you should use your common sense, it's also a good idea to familiarize yourself with concepts like medical ethics and in general what they expect you to do in certain situations, because for example things like lying are never okay. So number 9 is abstract reasoning, and as I said, abstract reasoning was never my favorite section, but what helped me a lot was sort of creating or going through a checklist. There's actually a mnemonic, which I can link you an article to, which is sort of just that you check through a list of things every time for every questions when it comes to abstract reasoning. And in the beginning, yes, that's sort of taking a lot of time because you have to go through every single thing, like for example, number of objects, color, and all of that. But after a while, it just becomes like a routine, natural, like a habit, and then it doesn't take too much time, and it really helps you to not miss valuable patterns which you're expected to see. And number 10, and my last tip, is accept that the UCAT or some questions just sometimes are a guessing game. So sometimes it's just not possible to come up with the right answer. And we all have those situations where you're just like, okay, I really do not know what to do in this situation, and that's okay. So in this case, just practice sort of eliminating the answers that definitely cannot be right, and then just guess from the remaining answers. So it's sort of like smart guessing. It's not totally blind guessing, so you're not just like, okay, A, B, C, D. I didn't choose C for a long time, so let's just take C. It's more like, okay, eliminate those answers which I know can't be right, because it's sometimes easier to rather than finding the right answer. And then from the remaining answers, if I still can't decide, I just choose the one which I feel like choosing, or with my gut feeling tells me that might be the right answer. So now that I told you my top 10 tips, let's get into the last bit of this video, which are helpful resources that I use and I would definitely recommend you to check out. So let's start with the resource that I think helped me the most, and it's also the resource which is the only resource that I actually paid for, and it's a book which I think is pretty common and pretty well known, and it's a book which is called How to Get into Medical School 1250 UCAT Practice Question. I will link it down below, so don't worry, but it's a book basically where you have so many practice questions, and they also give you detailed answers about each question. So it's not just like, oh, this answer would have been the right one. No, there's an explanation why this answer would have been the right one and what sort of their thought process was when they went over those questions. So I think that's really, really helpful. And they also have tips on timing and how to sort of approach different type of questions. So yeah, I think that's a very helpful resource. So the next one is the UCAT app. And the UCAT app is not something that you should use mainly for your preparation, but I just think it's a nice thing when you're, for example, sitting on a bus or maybe on a train, or maybe you have some 5 minutes in between something and you just want to use the time, then you can pull out the UCAT app and just do some quick preparation and revision, which I think is a good way for those 5 minutes where you don't know what to do to use them efficiently. So I think another very helpful resource, especially for the situational judgment test, is a document by the GMC, the General Medical Council, and it's called Good Medical Practice. And it will help you with sort of those scenarios where they will tell you that you're sort of a junior doctor or maybe a medical student right now on a work placement. And it's really helpful because it tells you what things are considered ethically correct and what things are simply just considered not good medical practice or inappropriate behavior, and obviously that will help you a lot in the situational judgment test. So this is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that I answered most of your questions and gave you a few helpful tips. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments or DM me on my Instagram. Also, let me know in the comments if you have already started with your UCAT preparation or where you're right now at with sort of the whole UCAT thing. And I would really appreciate if you could give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and subscribe to my channel for more videos. And I hope I see you guys next time, and until then, stay safe and bye.